is Susan Schoenberger. My job at Hartford Seminary is Director of Communications. And as we came into this very, very difficult time, the seminary decided to try to set up some webinars that would make use of our incredible faculty who have these areas of expertise that we wanted to be able to share with people. We are thrilled that we have 5 different webinars to offer this month alone. And this is our first. So we're really happy that you're here to participate with us. These webinars work a little bit differently than a regular Zoom session, so I hope you all got that information in an email. We are going to, the first thing we're going to do is launch a very quick poll just to find out who's on the call with us, and that will be helpful so that we can find out who you are. And also just kind of a neat feature of this webinar. We're also going to ask that people, as you have questions, to put them in the Q&A box that you'll see down at the bottom panel. So if you have a question, go ahead and put that in there. When we do, after we finish the presentation, there will be, we hope, plenty of time for questions, and we hope that a lot of this will be about answering your specific questions. So go ahead and put those questions in as you think of them. So we're doing the poll, and I hope you can see online how those questions are being answered. We have, it looks like about half are Christian ministers, pastors, or priests. We've got 1 rabbi, other faith leaders, chaplain, and lay leaders, and some others. So thank you so much for answering that poll. We'll give you just a minute or 2 more on that. When I talked to Donna about this and I said, you know, we're going to try this whole webinar thing and see how it goes, I said, you know, we're going to assume that there might be some glitches along the way, and I hope you all will be patient for that. And Donna said, well, welcome to the world of online funerals. So this is what we're dealing with these days, and it is so completely out of the ordinary that we're very fortunate to have somebody who is in New York and able to talk about this particular time that we're going through. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it right over to Donna, and she will go through this PowerPoint. And Stephen Javira is with us. He is our Communications and Development Associate, and he is going to be kind of guiding us through the Q&A and some other things. So I'm going to share our results of the poll, and then we'll take that down in a minute. But Donna, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for spending this hour together and for being the kind of person who wants to know how to help in a time that is filled with just, I don't even know what to call it anymore, but unnecessary human suffering that now is necessary. You know, there is the truth that all of us will die, but a lot of people are going to die from this virus early, and a lot of life is going to be robbed. I don't want to accuse the virus, and I don't want to make it a diabolical thing, but I do want to say that we're in a moment of time when all of a sudden we're going to be looking at a lot more death. And that's going to jam our systems. If you're in a situation where you're only going to be dealing with 1 or 2 requests to do a funeral, that's wonderful. And I'm sure you already know, most of you, how to do a funeral. This particular situation is going to create a real drain on our capacity to do these because we can't do them in person. And doing them virtually just feels disrespectful to the person who has died. And so I really started doing this because in one day I had 3 different hospitals call me and said, somebody thought you could help us out. And I said, oh, yes, I can. And I will do the service online with the nurses, the hospital staff. And in one case with one chief mourner, they were all people who died of corona, who died without anybody. And I realized I just did not have the time or the way or the shape to do this too much, but I could do it. I could help other people who I know want to be helpful and can do it. So here we are. And we're going to look at a few slides, and they'll come up, I hope. And you will be able to look at these slides over time. So I'm not going to go through them. I want to make sure we have lots of time for questions, because the main thing is, what do we hate about virtual telefuneraling? We hate that it's so impersonal, and it's not like it needs to be done any one way. And so I want to personalize it. So you can't do it right. You're not a performer. You're trying to connect. Don't act like you know the person if you don't, and don't act like you even know the family who is with you, because you don't know what they're experiencing. Don't do vanilla, General Motors, general, but do be prepared. And my final thing here is, don't say too much about religion and too little about the person, but also don't err on the other side. Achieve a balance. Let's keep moving through the slides. And do your best. Have a template. You want to be prepared to do all the things that you would do in a normal funeral, and to do it as well as you can, and then to be ready for the true experience of this abnormal reality, the abnormal reality that we are all experiencing right here, right now. We're learning virtually. It's new. I don't like it. I want to see your faces. I want to tell a joke. I want you to see mine. Let's go on one more. There are organizations, and they're listed in this slide, who are recruiting and training chaplains and clergy, retired clergy, people who it's not their first funeral, to volunteer in a lot of different situations. I would really, really love to think that some of you would want to sign up with these national networks, and or with your local hospital, and or create a clergy group in your own community. There's going to be a lot of business here, and I hate to put it that way, but that is the truth. Next slide. There is a wonderful organization out of Brandeis University called the Chaplaincy Innovation Network, and they are doing lots of work on this. If you want to know more than you're going to get in this hour, I highly recommend that you go to that site. Thank you. Next slide. Last rites. This is the thing that has been my biggest learning here. There is this kind of movie version of the bedside funeral. You all know it. The man in the suit and all dressed up looking like a minister, a priest, does the last rites. As the music comes up, it's very dramatic. That's not going to happen in telefunerals. But think about a template that includes the 3 things that last rites do include. I think this is very important. No matter if you're UCC like me, or a progressive Protestant like me, or whatever you are, you may be involved in doing a funeral for somebody, a memorial or a funeral for someone who you don't really know what their faith is. So why not use something classical? Confession is always a part of a last rite. Any regrets? If the person is already gone, talk to the family about what regrets they might have had. Anointing, that beautiful thing of touching a person, remember touching, with oil. And anointing doesn't have to be done that way. It can be a blessing deeply felt in your voice to them. And then the Last Supper, Holy Communion. Again, if you are able to work with the family and walk them through these things, or whoever is on the phone with you, even the nurse, it will help. It will grant dignity, classical dignity, and a kind of theological framework for what it is we try to do in funerals and memorials. We try to wrap it up. And then the space, online ritual design, again from the Chaplaincy Innovation Network. It's important to put on your pearls, put on your makeup if you're a woman, wear a jacket if you're a man. It's important to play the role. And I think most importantly, if you have a larger service, we're going into one with about 150 people this afternoon, the breakout room feature on Zoom, you might want to know. Next slide, please. So why are we doing this in the first place? My daughter-in-law said to me last night, oh my God, she's Catholic. If somebody in my family were to die in Texas today, I mean, I'd have to go. And I said, Becky, fight that impulse. Think about life. We are doing telefuneraling for a reason. Next slide. And then these are just some of the articles. There are stories everywhere on this right now. And you can get more context. And I'm going to stop talking now and say there is no one way to do this that's right. It's your way. Find your way. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Thank you. So I'll take questions. Oh, this, I'll show you the picture. Let me show you that picture if we can get back to it, Stephen.
Sure.
Then it's just a picture that I wanted to say hi to you in another frame with a smile on my face. These daffodils are little minis, and they were on our Easter table last Easter. And they were left up in the meeting room for about 5 days, and of course they all died, and it was just so depressing that Thursday after Easter to go up into this beautiful sanctuary at our church and see the dead daffodils, thinking, well, that's not very Eastery, but I planted them and look, they came back. And that's the thought I really want you to be left with, is a happy thought, an Easter thought, and you'll be getting the PowerPoint. Now, I think there might be some music before we transition to questions.
Yes.
Beautiful. It'll just be short.
That was it, Donna.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's a large funeral in the good old days for a man named Roger Deakins. Obviously, he had a lot of friends, and that's the inside of Judson Memorial Church where I pastor. Questions?
So Steve is going to read you the questions, Donna, and we'll go through them one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to scroll through, Donna, and pick a few here.
Sure.
Okay. how are you, this is from Mountain View United Church, how are you and others dealing with offering pre-recorded music during funerals? Are you doing a cappella, or have you folks found a cost-effective way to have a favorite hymn during services without violating the copyright laws?
Mhm. There are 3 organizations that give blanket copyright laws, and I can direct them to you. But if you don't want to go that direction, I think it's about $100 a year to buy those copyrights, and many, many congregations do it. Yes, I think pre-recorded music is perfect, but a lot of hymns are in what's called general domain. And so something like "Were You There?" Or "Shall We Gather at the River?" or a spiritual, or "O God, Our Help in Ages Past," which is a gorgeous hymn. These are all in the public domain, and you can get a recording off the internet for them. But yes, your question is super important. Music is what brings out the emotion. The more music you can have in a service, especially a Zoom service, is the better.
Okay, the next one comes from Diana Miller. Are there ways to make online funerals feel similarly different, not just like another Zoom call in a Zoom class? How do you differentiate the two between a regular call and something that's more in a respectful setting?
Right, right. You know, I work a lot with an organization called Bricks and Mortals, and, you know, missing a building. You know, when people see a church, they often think about funerals. They often think, oh, that will be my last stop. And without a building, differentiating the secular and the sacred in an online space, that slide about how to prepare your space, you might want to, instead of having the fan like you have in my background right now, or the Miro, or you might want to take all of that off and put up some Easter lilies. I'm doing that with this afternoon. We got 2 Easter lilies. We'll put them behind. And you might want to screen share with somebody else who's also doing that, so that, for example, Susan's screen could have the lilies on it and not the bookcase. You see where I'm going? You can decorate a Zoom room. And I have right here, I don't know if I can get it to you, but I've got a large bouquet right next to me of apple blossoms that obviously were forced. Can you see them?
Mm-hmm.
And they're coming in. So you could do something like that, but have different people put different things. Sunday for Easter at Judson, we're all going to be wearing hats and having flowers in our picture. So paying attention to that. And obviously, if you wanted something, you know, I often get, when I do something for a child or a child, I'll often get something, a stuffed animal, right, that belonged to the child. But you can do things like that, and I think it's important to do it. And so, especially now that I call it Zoombaya and Zombie, the Zombie world, where we're just all on Zoom, or I don't know about you, but I am on Zoom all day long. Changing it up, and even having a prayer, having a sacred experience, and then offering meditation and silence and music. Those are important things.
I'll tail end on that with your next question about Zoom. Is Zoom the preferred app with web funerals? Has it been done on Facebook Live, YouTube Live? What's your opinion on that, from Erica Phillips?
Okay, so far, I mean, my day-to-day has started with people. We do a daily meditation with about 50 people from our congregation at 9 o'clock. And 2/3 of the people had never done any telecommuting before. And so they finally have learned Zoom. They learned the chat, they learned the this, they learned the that. Now Zoom is under a lot of pressure by Zoom bombing, which I can't imagine anything that would be worse than to have a funeral Zoom bombed. But the people who are doing this kind of behavior, where they basically hack into your system, are just have to be the most heartless people in the world. So they put up pornography, they put up racist comments, they call you names, they put loud music into Zoom. Zoom as a platform is working like crazy to resolve these things, and there are protections you can put in your Zoom. I'm not the expert here, but if you just look up "protect my Zoom," you'll find 4 or 5 things you can do to turn off different things. The seminary has done that for this session. Are there other platforms? Absolutely. Facebook Live, YouTube Live, there's a thing called Blue Jeans, there's another Arrival, Zoom. There are going to be many platforms, but each will be like any app. You have to learn its techniques. I'm hoping that Zoom will make it through this difficulty, and that we'll be able to do it. I'm hoping that they won't all start charging us a fortune to do it. I'm hoping many, many things, but every day this technology is going to change, and you really do need, if you're like me, to say, look, I can guide you through a telememorial, and I can help you pastorally before and after. I can meet with you and design with you what you want. I can follow up with you on your grief, because I would never just do a slam bam, thank you ma'am service and be done with it. I would never do that. If I do your service, I'm going to check in with you before and after. I am hoping that you have to have a technical partner and stick with what your expertise is, which is not technology. If you're lucky enough to be both, way to go. But most of us aren't.
The next question comes from the First Congregational Church. Do you in service touch directly on the most painful situation of the COVID-19, not being able to be there with the loved one at the moment of their death?
Absolutely. I think that, in terms of, you have to warm people up wherever you are. Just imagine if there was a big snowstorm and you had to start the service late, or a lot of people couldn't come. Let's say the person was very elderly and people couldn't drive to it. Always contextualize. And we are now living with half of our brain power, because this context is so overwhelming to all of us. It would be like doing a funeral and not naming the fact that the person was dead and gone, to not name this setting.
Yeah. From Riverside Baptist, kind of touching on that as well, would you use the same order of service for a virtual service as you would in person? Responsive readings, unison prayers, homilies?
I would, and I would work with the family to choose those readings that would be appropriate to their tradition, their level of faith, how much. I would never do, I get invited to do weddings all the time, and the first sentence is always, please no mention of God. And I always say, nope. And then we go from there. And usually we figure out, what is appropriate language for God, and levels of language for God. So you may have a more secular, I think secular people and spiritually but not religious people, and people who just have a problem with God deserve to get buried too. And then we design the service for them. But I would keep a regular template going.
So about the service, I'm getting a few questions about music and sound. You provide a link to some kind of order or service or lyrics to a song if you were to accompany that in your service online?
Yes. In fact, what we've been doing with our virtual worship, which I think has been very important, is to have a bulletin, but to have people be able to follow the bulletin along. And then we have our musician play the piano in his apartment, which is a little tinny. but it's much better than him getting on a subway and going downtown. And so we play all 4 verses, and then people follow along in the bulletin that is there.
From Reverend David Dubaldam, for many families, having the body of the deceased present is considered necessary for a funeral.
Yes.
Thoughts on how to address this as a hospice chaplain?
That is, I would say that is the largest problem. And funeral directors are grappling with it tremendously, because it's the question of infection is terribly, terribly, terribly important. Personally, I would imagine that I would try to talk people out of that on the grounds of risks, but I do understand. I also, having said that, should say that I think open casket and viewing are often beautiful ways for people to say goodbye. And even without the religious, without a sense that you're violating the religion, I just hate the fact that so many people, their last view of their beloved is going to be the person very, very, very sick.
Let me open the chat here for, we're getting questions in a few different places. Okay, I have a good one here from St. James United Methodist. They've had many problems getting everyone onto the online platforms. And a funeral director shared just last week that they find it too unstable to do a funeral. I did a fully social distance service for the 5 immediate family members allowed to be present. What are other in-person options?
This is a really interesting question, because indeed the platforms are unstable, and they are likely to become more unstable as more and more people use them. They're not just unstable physically, they're also unstable because half of the people will be doing this for the first time and very unlikely to be able to use it. And so that is exclusive all by itself. So imagine you're not only grieving, but you're also excluded because of the technology. It's, they're really, if you have the time, you know, what's happened in my experience over the years is that memorials go later and later. You schedule them further out because so many people are flying in from someplace else. So that, you know, you used to do it right away when everybody could find everybody. Look, there's nothing ideal about this. Therefore, your question about the 6-foot distance, if you've got somebody to enforce it, and I really mean enforce it, not a cop, but a member of the family, it can work. But if anybody gets emotional and wants a hug, you know what's going to happen, especially in a very intimate, very powerful situation. So in-person options, if, let's say you're in a funeral chapel or in a small church setting and you know there are only going to be 30 people there, if you enforce it and train people to do that, it's the same as training them how to use the virtual. So if you have time leading up to it, you could have a member of the family teach the other members of the family Zoom and be ready to, you know, accommodate yourself to that. So preparing to be as inclusive as possible. And so in my experience, people say they're going to social distance and then they just don't. That's why the government has had to kind of crack down, right?
So John Morgan asks, what has been your personal experience in getting attendees connected to a Zoom or Facebook funeral online? There's people who haven't used these platforms before, and how do you get the word out, in a sense?
you need to find someone in the family who is tech savvy, who then becomes the tech chaplain, or if you're doing the distancing, becomes the cop, and you need to announce to people that we are going to enforce this. And we're going to train you in how to do it. I don't think the minister should be expected to do that.
Sarah Armstrong had more of a comment here. A good resource for crafting funerals with people from a variety of backgrounds. She's citing a book called Crafting Meaningful Funeral Rituals, a Practical Guide by Gordon Lennox and Margaret Holloway. Could you maybe elaborate on crafting for a variety of backgrounds of people with funerals, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, that kind of thing?
Well, I think that you have to find out who you're dealing with. There are often different points of view about how grandma should be buried or mom should be buried, or, that exists. So in an ordinary funeral, you would find out who the chief mourners are, who makes the decisions. And you would find out as much as you possibly could about the deceased. You may know the deceased, but you might not know certain things that the family would want mentioned. I mean, I often am surprised to find out that someone will say, well, she lost a child at birth. Who knew? She would want that named. She survived cancer. He wrote a book, and that was the thing that made him happiest, even though he was a carpenter. Just things that you want to be able to say that humanize and personalize the person. I said in the slides also, if I know the family, I also want to say something that will either evoke a laugh or a sigh. John was not always the person he wanted to be. Everything wasn't perfect in John's life. Something that we are teaching the living how to die, and we're teaching the living how to live in a service. There are multiple objectives, and we are honoring the dead and acting as though the person who is dead mattered to God and to us. And we're helping people let go of that person so they can rearrange the furniture in their life and live without them. And we're doing so many things at once. So a lot of it's not just the hour or so service, it's the preparation that goes before. And now we have another layer of preparation about how terrible this is, that we have to do it this way, how much training we need, how we're pioneers and we're not going to get it right. And so we need the technological training. We need not to just get all uptight about how we're going to do it wrong and not be able to go to the funeral, go to the experience and enjoy it. So anyway, that's
right.
It's a lot.
Erica Hagan asks, do you offer a kind of a when this is all over, do a memorial service in person option as a follow-up online?
Absolutely. And so that's why I think you can do something minimal and marking for this time, and then set a date in the future for the real thing.
The second part of our question was, does that undermine the effectiveness of doing an online service?
Of course it does. And frankly, doing online services is not that effective. So we're in a whole new, it doesn't, an online service is not going to, allow me to look at my husband's body and say goodbye to it and kiss it goodbye. Not going to happen. So that's, this is a situation of tremendous loss on top of tremendous loss on top of tremendous loss.
Some people are actually citing your book, Approaching the End of Life.
Yes.
How could you maybe elaborate on that and how it's appropriate?
It's a book for It's about approaching the end of life, and it includes direction about funerals and memorial services and what you hope to do then. But the whole book is about the whole approach to the end of life, and I talk about how we have the talk with our children about death and dying, how we live through our, I call it early dotage in our 60s, mid dotage in our 70s, and late dotage in our 80s, and how we get acquainted with dying and have the luxury that so many people aren't going to have, to be prepared to die as opposed to afraid of it.
Yeah. I've kind of combined a few questions that were similar in a sense. I'm not seeing, okay, so here's one. Okay, so here's an interesting one from Mary Barnett. Mentioned the importance of communion at a funeral.
Yes.
How can you help us shape this digitally, I would imagine?
Yes, so part of the instruction and preparation, and not the technical, would be to have people prepare their own elements and have them with them at whatever table they're sitting at, and to do a virtual blessing for, if the pastor has a bread, you break it, we eat it together, you pour. In other words, I would make a lot out of it because you're dealing with such a little picture of yourself. And it's a mime, a mimic of an agape meal that gathers people.
Do you include any options for people to share stories, resemblances in the online setting itself?
Yes, again, if that's planned. One of the things I want the chief mourners to tell me is who should speak, and that is often for lack of a better word, a political subject. How many should speak? Who should speak? Who speaks last? Can the wife or husband or son or daughter manage speaking? And I'll often say, we'll decide at the time you're ready to speak whether you can do it, and we'll put you in the service. And if you can't, you will have written something and I'll read it for you.
I have a question, Donna. Can you talk about the services that you have already conducted in this way, and maybe point out any sort of highlights or positive things that have come out of those?
Yes. My virgin voyage was last Tuesday. A nurse called from Bellevue Hospital. I could tell she was very, very emotional. And she said, somebody gave me your name. And I think it was one, I don't even know who it was, to tell you the truth. And Emma just died. She's been in here for about a week, and she had the virus. And we have not been able to find anybody. She came in on her own. They had an address from her purse. They sent people over to her building. New York has a lot of people who are on their own in these huge buildings. And they went through the building, and there was nobody on her registry, her what do you call it? Her lease. It was her, and who to contact in case of emergency. Anyway, the hospital really did a very, very good job. They will not be doing that anymore. And the reason is that I'm getting a lot of information from people in assisted living and nursing homes where they have a virus. Once that happens, the staff is so busy taking temperatures every 8 hours, dealing with the people who are sick, making sure that people don't violate the social distancing calls. And that is, on steroids in hospitals. So I was very impressed that this big city hospital tried to find out who Emma's chief mourner was. Mm-hmm. And I think that was bothering the nurse, who was the really very religious person, because she and I did the service together on the phone. And she said that she herself was Baptist and Pentecostal. And I said, well, had you talked with Emma at all? And she said, yes, I did talk with her the time before she went on the intubation. And Emma, and she said, I asked her what kind of service she would like. And she said, Emma said she wanted something very simple, and she wanted to be dedicated to God. Emma was white. I think she was 76 or something. I can't remember now, sorry. So this nurse, who was African-American, said, well, could you just either do the last rites, or can you do a prayer for her? And I said, do you think Emma's Catholic? And she said, I have no idea, you know. And anyway, so I just did a prayer, but mostly calmed the nurse down, if you want to know the truth. And Emma was gone, because she wasn't there. And she was not even in the room anymore. You know, she had been moved out. So I just did a prayer, and then I called the nurse back a couple days later, and she said that she was doing okay. She was getting her stride, is what she told me, which was kind of beautiful.
Any other questions, Steve?
I'm not seeing many come in. They're actually, people are sharing Donna's book on Amazon, Lucinda Mosier's book on Amazon. So there's some good activity in the chat box here. And we will be releasing the slideshow. I see a lot of questions about that. Mm-hmm. So that will be public. But no.
So if there are no final questions, I'm actually going to put up another poll for all of you. Before I do that, I just want to call everybody's attention to not only our additional webinars that we're doing. One is on online giving, and that is how faith communities need to be doing online giving these days, how they can set that up, and what an advantage that will be. So keep looking out for information on that. But we also have our summer courses that will all be offered online starting May 18th. And Donna is one of the instructors in that summer program. And I think what she's going to be talking about, this concept of bricks and mortals, is pretty relevant to the time that we're all living in as well. So Donna, I thought maybe you would want to say something about that course.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that before this pandemic, there was another pandemic that was not as lethal and was very much slow moving. And it was the closing of religious buildings, the decline in membership in congregations, and the cost of deferred maintenance, and this whole notion of, is God in a, does God need a house? You know, that line, here's the church, here's the steeple, look inside and see all my people. So that is a huge change that's coming, and I've been helping congregations adapt creatively to it. It's a problem, but it's also a giant possibility. And I think now that we're looking at the arrival of virtual worship, which is just, it's like, wow, did that happen quick? This is only going to make us rethink our sacred spaces. And for me, we need sacred spaces. I can't wait to be back in my meeting room. I can't wait. And I also know that it's going to be really different. Really different.
Right. So that course, like most of our other courses, starts, as I said, May 18th, runs through June 26th, I believe, and is another way of kind of acknowledging where we all are right now. We're going to be doing half off our regular tuition for those courses for both for-credit students and auditors. So please take a look at our website or email me or ask for more information on that. We certainly have been trying to get the word out about that, but it's an important opportunity for people. There are some really good courses and a new one that we developed over the last few weeks called Interfaith Leadership in Times of Crisis. And that is with Dr. Lucinda Mosier, as someone referenced her book in the chat. So please take a look at those. We would love to have you. And I'm going to launch our second poll just so we can also get an idea of how this all went, and also maybe some other ideas for future webinars. So I have to figure out how to launch that other poll. Do you see it, Steve?
Yes, I do see it. I'll launch it for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead and take that poll. So I think most of you have voted. Thank you so much for responding to those questions. Now we're going to just do one final thing, and I think we can end probably a few minutes early, which is fine. We are doing these webinars for free to our community and to other people who might need them. But we do have an opportunity for people to contribute if they would like to, if they are able. Steve can show you, we're going to put up that QR code, and there's kind of an easy way to scan it with your phone's camera, and that would take you to a website where you can make a quick donation. So Steve, do you want to just show how to do that?
Any camera phone like this, an iPhone, if you quite simply just put it onto your photo setting, open your camera, hover it over the QR code itself, and you will get a little dialog box like that. Sorry, it's a bit odd to see, but it'll prompt you to go to Safari where our donation page is. So no app needed, very simply just open, no picture needed also, just hover over the QR code itself, and you should be prompted to go to our page.
Great. All right, well, any final thoughts, Donna?
Thank you all for coming, and I really would be happy to talk with any of you about any of the things that were said. I'm learning. It's not like I'm an expert. I am learning as I go. So you will be my teachers too. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all.